Okay, this is a book review. Here's the book called Thinking About Evolution, 25 Questions That Christians Want Answered About Evolution. Here's all the authors. There's multiple authors. The one who I know best is Fazale Rana. He's a biochemist. He's a smart guy. And he wrote entire books about the fine-tuning arguments in biology and biochemistry to support intelligent design. Other people who've written books about the fine-tuning arguments of biochemistry to support intelligent design would include people like Michael Denton, for example. And Dennis Noble is right there, too. There's a lot of videos on YouTube with Dennis Noble. And the other guy who's real popular and he's a genius on the internet is James Tour. Another really smart guy is Stephen Meyer. He especially more talks about the fine-tuning arguments of astronomy and whatnot. Okay, so let's go through some of this. By the way, just to give you my background, I majored in evolutionary biology at Stanford University. I was an A-plus student athlete of the year over there. And I can tell you, I don't think evolution is true as far as the origin of life and the origin of complexity. It can explain what we would call microevolution, the variety that occurs within one species. For example, there's a lot of different types of dogs, and you can selectively breed for different types of dogs, okay? You can selectively breed different types of horses, different types of cats. And conventional evolutionary theory, it's now called neo-Darwinism, it can explain those things reasonably well. And it provides a useful concept to sort of organize your thinking about different types of species and whatnot. I also studied a lot of zoology. I had considered being a veterinarian, and so I spent a lot of time studying evolutionary biology. A lot of my best friends were evolutionary biologists, and we would talk about this stuff nonstop, read all the books. I used to go bird watching with a bunch of friends, studying, nature, ecosystems, environments, and stuff. I was heavily into it. I was going to be a wildlife evolutionary biologist or a wildlife veterinarian before I decided to become a medical doctor. So I have extensive background in these areas. And I can tell you, I'm not buying it. I think that there's things that have branched off so-called evolutionary theory, like the environmental movement. And a lot of that has a secondary agenda. And the same thing with evolutionary biology. Why does evolutionary biology get pushed so heavy in the public school system at the high school level, college level, grad school level? And I'm going to tell you, it's because there's big money behind pushing it. It's basically the creation story for atheism. And then why would atheism be promoted so heavily? The reason why atheism is promoted so heavily is that the billionaire, perverts that run the world, they need that as a moral foundation, actually as an absence of a moral foundation, in order to be able to do whatever they want. You have to remember, if there is no God, that means whoever's rich and powerful is like an equivalent of a god on earth, like the ancient pagan gods. The Roman emperors were all considered gods, during the time of the Roman Empire. So basically, that gives them unlimited power, which is what they want, okay? If Nero wanted to sleep with your daughter, he didn't have to ask your permission. He could just take her, okay? And they want that type of power, okay? So this is not by accident. It is on purpose that evolution gets pushed. And a lot of the people who push atheism and evolution most aggressive, it's because they believe that that's what the world needs. They think it'll be an improvement to minimize the number of proles. This is all in writing. It's in writing. It's even written in stone that the number of proles should be reduced about 95%. Okay, this has been this way for many decades. It's just that most proles are illiterates, functional illiterates. They don't read anything. They don't know anything. They just have their little public school miniature microscopic education, so all this stuff is new to them. There's a lot of famous scientists that have been talking about these things for decades. Lynn Margulis, Dennis Noble, James Tour, Michael Behe, Douglas Axe, Stephen Meyer, Fazale Rana, Michael Denton. That's just some of them. There's a whole bunch more of them. Okay, so, the basic question asked by James Lennox. If you saw your name written on the sand in the beach, you would know an intelligent, literate person had wrote it. So how is it that that requires an intelligent agent, an intelligent person to do that, but you think that 3.3 billion base pairs of complex DNA biochemistry could write itself? It's insane. The information has to come from somewhere. It's very complicated, sophisticated information. Do you think all of these computer programs wrote themselves? No. The DNA human genome, 3.3 billion base pairs, it's far, far, far more complicated than any computer program. But a computer program can't write itself. How could 3.3 billion base pairs write itself? Okay. The mitochondria splits the atom. It splits the hydrogen atom into a proton and an electron, and then turns that into energy. The level of sophistication is off the charts to do that. And they can put 100,000 of them in one tiny little cell, smaller than the head of a pin. How could that be done when no one on Earth can do anything remotely like that? By accident. It's not by accident, okay? The more you study this, the more you believe in God. And I say that based on a deep knowledge, having spent many, many decades of my life deep in study on these things, okay? When you hear all these atheists, they're usually, lightweight BS artists who are trying to push communism and think the proles need to be reduced, and they pretend they're doing it from a scientific point of view. That's what you really see. They're really smart people when you have open conversations with them that have thought deeply on this. It's like Newton said, if you study science seriously, deeply, you realize there's some type of intelligence way, way, way beyond us. Okay, Theodore Dobzhansky said, nothing in biology makes sense except in light of evolution. And I would say, in light of intelligent design, don't get me wrong, they're complementary. Evolution's good for explaining a lot of microevolution, simple things, but you get to the big stuff, no way. Okay, you can't, a mutation is like scratching an audio CD. You're not going to improve Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Handel, etc. by scratching their audio CD. It just ain't going to happen. Okay? You have to be able to add to it, to create new stuff, to improve it. When you look at origin of life, the best atheist guy is Nick Lane. I don't even think he's an atheist. I think he just pretends to be an atheist because it helps you to get funding in academics. His hobby is, searching around cathedrals. Yeah, a guy who likes to search around cathedrals. You tell me he's an atheist? Yeah, right. But he pretends to be one on the internet, okay? Anyways, but he's a bright guy, and he talks about, potential simple biosyntheses in these, underwater vents in sulfur pools and deep beneath the ocean. Okay, that's nice, but it's nowhere close to origin of life. The best origin of life guy on the internet's James Tour. He's like a nano-organic synthetic chemist. He's a genius guy, okay? Watch some of his videos, okay? You'll see the level of complexity. It's not just biosynthesis of all the building blocks of life. They have to be chiral, and you have to purify them. That's not easy to do. Evolutionary theory cannot explain the origin of eukaryotes. So bacteria are prokaryotes. Eukaryotes, they always say the big thing is they have a nucleus, but really the big thing is that they have mitochondria. Okay, and it doesn't make sense, a simple phagocytosis, and they think it only happened once, is going to generate useful energy for the cell. Because no mitochondria in its right mind would give all its ATP away. How did that happen? And the DNA codon system is actually a little bit different for mitochondria than it is for the nucleus, the rest of the cell. It's going to change its isoleucine codon to methionine because it wants more methionine in its side chains because they're easier to protect from oxidative stress, destruction within a mitochondria, and a mitochondria's got a lot of oxidative stress compared to anywhere else in the human body. Okay, then there's the Cambrian expansion, in the ballpark of 540 million years ago. They call that the biology Big Bang. All these phyla of fully formed body types came out of nowhere. Okay, and look at the complexity, like the eye of a trilobite. Stephen Meyer has a fossil of the eye of a trilobite. It's incredibly complex. Okay, these are systems of irreducible complexity that didn't just happen by gradual changes. Okay, you don't have the transitional forms. That's what evolutionary theory and Darwin predicted. And Darwin even knew that his theory would be falsified if you couldn't find the transitional forms, and they can't. Okay. The irreducible complexity is so many things, from flagella to the immune system to the intermitochondrial membrane, the clotting system, the human eye, the human brain. It goes on and on. The protein synthesis of a big protein, it's so complex, and to get it to fold correctly, the likelihood of it happening by chance is off the charts unlikely. And then there's all the BS claims about human and chimps being so similar. Let me ask you something. If you've hung around with college guys and walked into a couple fraternity rooms, you see lots of guys have all these pinups of pretty women on their wall, okay? Have you ever seen one guy that had a pinup of a chimp on his wall in a doggy style position or something? I've never seen it, not once. And so what I'm trying to say is, the argument is a pile of crap that a chimp is like us 99%, 98%, or some other nonsense. No way. Two fraternal female cute girls, the Doublemint twins, they're like 10% different at least. The Doublemint twins, okay? So forget about chimps being that much like us. A chimp is like a knuckle-walking, big hairy monster. No guy in his right mind, not even after drinking 24 beers, would want a chimp in his bed, okay? It's ridiculous. And the fact that people tend to believe that's ridiculous, they'll take one little tiny part of the genome and find similarities there. But we've got tremendous overlap in the genome with all the other creatures on Earth for glycolysis, that run oxidative phosphorylation type of metabolism, for Krebs cycle, for the mitochondria. There's a lot of things that are sort of a pattern that works and they stay the same. Okay, and then when you start talking about so-called junk DNA, lots of so-called junk DNA is not junk DNA, it's regulatory DNA. And then you get into the concept of orphan genes. Those are genes that are unique to an individual species, and you don't find homologs for them in any other species. You can't explain them with evolutionary theory. Okay. And again, that might explain why evolutionary theory works for microevolution, but not for macroevolution. Okay. We've got 23 chromosomes. Chimps have 24. We can speak, count, read, have symbols, big brains, music, religion, but chimps don't. Chimps are stupid compared to humans. Really, really, really stupid. When they try to get them to talk, they don't even want to talk. Okay. Let's see what else. I thought some of my ex-wife's family might have evolved from a common ancestor to chimps, but my family was created in the image of God. Even the cavemen would make paintings on the walls of the ancient caves, but most modern cultures other than Christians don't paint. So in a sense, they're kind of backward compared to Christians. Maybe some of them have a common ancestor with chimps. Evolutionary theory, like I said, you can explain microevolution, variety of dogs. I explained to you why so much money gets pumped into it, and I talked about the orphan genes. So that's pretty much about all we need to cover at this point. So it's an okay book. It's a little boring. I've read tons of stuff before. It's kind of a nice format if the stuff is new to you. You can watch the videos. Fazale Rana's got all these people I mentioned. They've all got videos online. So anyways, I hope you found that helpful.